Head down, you gotta have tunnel vision just to break the crowd. Some people will always be a bit thick in the head. Show out, well if you tell the truth they might scream and shout. You put in the work, now to knock them dead. And I hope that we can laugh it off someday. But the best things happen when you let them come your way, yeah. And I know that we'll laugh it off someday. So head down for now. Head down where there ain't a lot of love coming from your town. These people wish they could sing but can't carry a tune. Slow down, it doesn't mean you're wrong when you've got your doubts. Be patient, it's all coming soon. And I hope that we can laugh this off someday. But the best things happen when you let them come your way, yeah. And I know that we'll be laughing it off someday. So head down for now. So head down for now. And I hope that we can laugh this off someday. But the best things happen when you let them come your way, yeah. And I know that we'll be laughing.
Hello, everyone. Greg Staley here of Divergemedia. We're excited to bring our next guest on. Benjamin Dichter was the public relations head of the Freedom Convoy Corps, the organizer corps that went to Ottawa for the Freedom Convoy protest. Recently, he just had his Public Order Emergency Commission testimony. There was a lot of things he felt that didn't get to come out, a lot of things that he wanted to touch on, and that we've kind of drilled into a bit in the research in the background, and we're excited to be able to ask some questions. So everyone, let's welcome Benjamin Dichter. How are you doing?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I'm good. So I guess the background here would be you just got off your Public Order Emergency Commission testimony, and you ruffled some feathers. I think it's safe to say.
Well, it was several months of watching the needle being lined up to be stabbed into my back. And I couldn't say anything during this entire period. I tried to keep it to myself because I needed to see how things would play out and if they would actually go through with it. And luckily, there were some people who remained on the board who reached out to me and warned me about what was going on. So I had a little bit of warning as to what was going to happen.
Yeah. So we'll back that up. Jim Carhalios was your lawyer.
Yes.
So let's just back it right. So why'd you choose Jim? I guess is a good question. I have a lot of respect for Jim. I think he's an incredibly sharp man, and I think his heart's in the right place. So that was something that stood out to me. I was like, oh, hey, Jim is there. And the beard threw me right off. Not gonna lie, Jim with a beard is like Mr. Clean.
Can you tell him? Can you tell? I told him. I said for months I've been telling him. So yeah. How did Jim get involved? Okay, so essentially, I reached out to him for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I know lots of lawyers. I produce a podcast for lawyers. I understand. I'm the farthest thing from one, but I understand the process. My mother was a paralegal. My best friend is an attorney in Miami. So I'm not new to this industry and how it operates. So I reached out, and that's why I had so many red flags going on in my head during the convoy, and I think certain people got wind of it and they realized, okay, this guy understands how things operate in the legal community, and that might have been a problem. But anyways, I was thinking about how am I going to address this, and I went to Jim for a couple of reasons. First, Jim doesn't talk about this a lot, but before becoming a lawyer, he was an engineer. So this is a guy who went to an engineering school, worked in engineering, and then went back to school to get a law degree. And, you know, as we were in a conversation with Jordan Peterson, in like a private conversation, and I cut Jim off, and I sent that to Jordan, and he said, "Oh, so you've had a real job," or something like that, like in a joke, right? So I know I needed somebody who would be hyper focused on attention to detail. I needed somebody who's not a coward, and there's no shortage of lawyers who are cowards. And I also needed somebody who understood the players and the political element of this and how it all operates in the infrastructure. And this is something we've both understood for quite a while, because we become pretty close friends over the past several years and talked about this stuff. And it just became a natural. Once I realized that, oh, they're not actually going to represent me, went through my mental Rolodex and just realized, you know what? Jim would be perfect for this if he would take the case. And lucky enough, he did.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. We talked just on the political element, and I'll just use that as an olive branch here. So on the political elements, we had Dean French, the former chief of staff. Sorry, I'm writing in my journal
and
here.
Personal money manager for Doug Ford.
So long-time relationship there. Dean French interjects himself alongside, I guess, Wilson and the Freedom Corps lawyers to negotiate on behalf of the protesters. Was there ever a formal vote on that? Did the board ever say, hey, were they notified, like, hey, we think this is a good idea. We want to bring Dean French in. We think he'll have some sway with people, or at least the connections, any of that? Like, or was it just one day you found out Dean French through the newspapers was negotiating on behalf?
I heard Dean French's name from, I think it was, I remember so many things were going on at once and my feeds were going like crazy, but I think it was a Toronto Sun article, if I'm not mistaken, mentioned that the Star Sun, one of them, that Dean French was negotiating. And this was this wasn't the beginning. This is the middle towards end of it that I heard his name. And I go, what the hell is Dean? That's Doug Ford's buddy. And then all the pieces and all the red flags that were in the back of my mind started to fit together. I really put it all together after everything, when we were preparing all the material for the book. By the way, honkingforfreedom.com. Book will be coming out on Remembrance Day, and our book launch is on Monday in Toronto. We're having an event. But putting all the pieces together after the fact really solidified how this was all operating in the background, because we weren't told this when it was occurring. It was crazy.
Okay, so that's Dean French. So Dean French gets involved, and then we have some.
Apparently, I've never met Dean French. I didn't even know what he looks like. I just know the name, right? So
yeah, and so I just want to back up. We'll go back to this. Yep. This will be a good talk point. The political elements again. So most people don't know Keith Wilson's background. I'll just give a very general 10,000-foot view.
Okay.
He got heavily involved in environmental case or something to that effect in Alberta. Government was trying to run some basically nonsense on transmission lines. They were trying to do something that was bad for the taxpayer. Okay. He points this out, came to prominence, and he actually joined the Wild Rose Party for a little bit. After a short period of time, he separates from the Wild Rose Party over, he didn't want to be perceived as in partisan politics. That's what he's saying. But then he, later on, I'm going to bring this up, endorsed Jason Kenney, his leadership. So he gets back into the politics here. This is the Edmonton Sun, 2017. I'm just going to pull up the title here so that people don't know or know where we're pulling from. Lauren Gunter, Jason Kenney gets ringing endorsement from the conservative stalwart. Who's that conservative stalwart? Would be Keith Wilson. So we just pop down here. I want to get his Wilson resigned his position with the local Wild Rose Association after just 2 meetings to avoid the appearance that his work was partisan, but there is no doubt that the Daniel Smith Wild Rose Party benefited greatly from the public outcry that Wilson stirred up. Coming down here, after several conversations with former Wild Rose members about which candidate to vote for, Wilson felt he had to speak out publicly. He said, I have tremendous respect for Brian Jean, the former Wild Rose boss and Kenney's leadership rival. I admire him for the service he has given Alberta, but Wilson says, quote, it's obvious who the only choice is, Jason Kenney. And I bring this up because this is the same Jason Kenney. I don't know, again, I'm going to reach out to Wilson on this, but I don't think I don't know that he would feel the same way about Kenny, because this is, again, today. I mean, he wouldn't feel perhaps the same today, because Kenny was a guy who was jailing pastors for simply holding church, right? And we go down here, and he was saying, this is the line that just rattles my cage. Kenny said it's irresponsible to be delivering, quote, libertarian sermons. I'll give you the Christian perspective on that. The church isn't the government's. You don't get to decide. Right. But that's the background, 10,000-foot view. And then one of the things Jim brought up, your lawyer, Mr. Carhalios, leader of the New Blue Party, was that the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, chairman of the board, is Tanya Granick Allen's husband. Why does that matter? And we'll just pull this up so people know we're not just pulling this out of our, rear end. Board of Directors of Irish County Justice Center. This is Jonathan Allen. There you go. That's her husband. Why does that matter? Now, if you follow the surface level of politics, you would have the perception that Tanya Granick Allen was ousted from the Conservative Party and that there's probably animosity behind the scenes. However, if you're an insider, you might have a different perspective. I bring that up to say, who is Tanya Granick Allen? The kingmaker in the Ontario PC leadership race. And what's next for her? So this was written, I'm not sure, March 14th, 2018, right after the leadership race. And here's what they had to say. Granick Allen was the kingmaker of the contest, which concluded Saturday night as dramatically as it had begun. Without Granick Allen in the race, Ford wouldn't have had enough votes to eke out his narrow win over Christine Elliott. So the background there, I mean, that helped Doug Ford. And then Doug Ford's chief of staff, Dean French, has interjected himself into the negotiations, and they negotiated a deal. So let's go to that. They negotiated a deal. This was one point of contention people had probably with your testimony, because Mr. Wilson came pretty hard in the paint back at you.
Well, he came first, right?
Yeah. So on that, you had an email, and I'm going to pull this all up and then we can talk. You say here, BJ Dichter from BJ says, looks good to me. And you were responding to, I'm going to read it in full. I just think it's easier to get this all out, and then we can just discuss it. Yeah. February 12th, 2022, Keith Wilson wrote, last night at the board meeting, the board directed that a drafting committee of Sean, Ryan, Ava, and Keith draft a document that would describe the Freedom Convoy's overall demands of all governments and a way forward strategy. Hence, the drafting committee will keep working on the broader document for review by the board tomorrow. Review by the board tomorrow. And I'm going to emphasize that, and I'll let you address that in a minute here. Below is a draft communication for the captain/truckers specific to the mayor's arrangement to allow us to advance into Wellington and Elgin, while at the same time taking away the excuse that Trudeau wants to unleash police goons and seize trucks. And he says, remember, we were trying to block Trudeau from having a justification to cause the police to use the emergency powers. And then below is the draft communication. Basically, that's the mayor's agreement. Don't need to go into the details, but here's an email communication between yourself and Keith Wilson, February 14th. You're saying, I spent hours up to 1 a.m. being scolded by 2,000 of our supporters on Twitter Spaces last night for the letter to the mayor. It took a couple of hours, but finally got them on board and understanding. Dagny is trying to draft a press release today. She's being told by some lawyer that they are drafting something between Tamara and the city, and they won't tell us what is in it. I need your help to end this process. This was at 8:01 in the morning. And Keith replied, neither Ava nor I are drafting anything for the city. More rumors. Okay. So I think that's a good point to jump off, and then I'll let you address it. And there's lots more to go into. So, people were upset. They had this perception, I guess, to contextualize this a bit, that I guess we should bring this in. There was text messages. You see the deal here. Where is it? You say more fake news, this time from City News. No deal has been struck. The federal government has not yet lifted its mandates in passports. And then you used Tamara's account as a public relations. You had control of that, and you retweeted basically the same thing. And so that was a lot of criticism. Miller came hard at you as a result of that.
My lawyer, by the way, because technically I'm still a member of that board. That's my lawyer.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that needs to be emphasized. These are people that are supposed to be representing you. and that there shouldn't be a motive to make another organizer look bad. But the issue here, I guess, from their perspective, they're saying, listen, I guess you could say there's a framework in place. I think we could agree that there was a framework in place with the mayor, but the board hadn't looked at it. There had been no formal vote. And then when you message Keith, you say, what's going on with this? He says, there is no draft, more rumors. So, I mean, that's a lot to unpack. But again, you were 3 hours. You had people just drilling you yes or no questions as much as they could. Yeah. And a lot of this wasn't able to come out. So I'm really just trying to give you an opportunity to clear the air, because it is a lot to understand and comprehend here.
Yeah, and I think what's very important for people to understand, I know it was frustrating for the format in the commission, and it was frustrating for me too, because I had to figure out how I could pack as much dense information into my responses to yes no questions, right? Because it's not like a vlog where I can just go up and start talking and explain everything to you. And there's a reason for that, because all the evidence has been submitted. We started getting evidence to us 48 hours before, and I'm in the car. Jim says to me, he sends me a message saying, it's going to be a long night. Great, because we had to compile our evidence in response. So I said to him, I'm going to a Bitcoin meetup in Ottawa, so it's going to be an extra long night. And it ended up being, a couple of nights of being up until 2, 3 in the morning and just sifting through all of this stuff and then getting our evidence uploaded. The reason I tell you that is because, yes, the format is frustrating, but the format is just an interview process around broader evidence that's been submitted to the commission. That's all on the record. So much like in a court case, the evidence that's submitted and what goes through in discovery, for example, is often far more important than the actual proceedings itself. And that's the case with this commission as well. So people should, those documents, I believe, will or are, I'm not sure yet, will be publicly available. And it's important for people to go through all of those documents so they'll understand exactly the nature of what's there. So, for example, I'm going to tie this all back to your question in a second. So, for example, when Keith Wilson said, I don't know, BJ took he called it crypto, it's Bitcoin, and he took it somewhere and did something with it. And I thought, that's really unfortunate for a member of the bar to say, because you were my lawyer who received the seed phrase when it was sent to your agent, Norm Groot. You're the one who submitted it to the bankruptcy trustee. You did it. So it's I don't know. He forgets. Did he forget that he did it? I don't know. He was counsel on it. So once you see that, that's the nature of what the relationship was like. I never knew when he was telling me the truth. And because technically he wasn't my lawyer, he was the JCCF's lawyer. So he could lie to me as much as...
Can we drill into that a little bit more? What do you mean by that? I know it was brought up like a retainer agreement. I was looking through the documents. I didn't see a retainer brought forward into evidence. Okay. So what do you mean by that? Because I know it had come up in your testimony that was it an agreement that Wilson made with the JCCF as a... Like, how does that work?
So the JCCF issued a retainer, which I don't believe they legally can. I think the Democracy Fund can issue a legal retainer, but the JCCF doesn't have the legal requirements to do so. But whatever. Listen, my mom's a paralegal, so I know a little bit of this stuff. So when I saw a retainer from the JCCF and this guy he says, I'm going to be your lawyer. And he was clear. He says, I'm acting on behalf of the JCCF for you guys. And I'm like, okay, so you're the JCCF's lawyer and you're just going to come in and try to direct us. Okay, fine. If you're going to give us free legal advice, which we need right now, we're in the middle of chaos and we have this class action suit. We need somebody to go into court to fight these injunctions. I figured, okay, well, let's try to work within this frame. I did everything I could to try to work within this framework, knowing that, all right, here's a lie here, here's a lie there, but okay, fine. But maybe we're all on the same side. Let's see how this all plays out. So you're seeing with those emails the type of mixed messaging and the complete opposite of a message that we would have been told a few hours later or sometimes simultaneously. It was almost impossible to keep up with it. Plus the fact that I was doing interviews constantly and getting thousands of emails and requests and Dagny needed to, and we can get into Dagny when you want to ask, was asking about PR stuff. Like it was just never ending. And that was just a little bit of the chaos that we were dealing with. And we mitigated it the best we could.
And some of the concerns there is just to bring that back to the political elements. Again, you're saying the JCCF thread, right? So I'm acting on behalf of you, or like for you, but on behalf of the JCCF.
That's right.
JCCF chairman of the board is Tanya Granick Allen's husband. This is what Jim Carhally has brought up, right? In his interview with Rebel. Okay, so we'll bring that up again. I don't want people. We have more people that have poured in thinking I'm pulling this from somewhere. Okay. That's the concern there. And then that, obviously, Tanya Granick Allen was the kingmaker, basically was the reason Doug Ford got in. And so when you see these relationships behind the scenes, and you're saying there were some seeds of distrust, for instance, you brought up the seed phrase on the Bitcoin. Was there other things? What were the tip-offs for you? What were the red flags? What were the things that caused you concern? And when did those things happen? Because I think, it was it was a whirlwind of 3 weeks, and the timeline the testimony jumps all over the place, right?
This is why I wrote a book. This is why I plugged the book again. HonkingForFreedom.com. I'm telling you, it's going to give you a lot of insight. But it's a positive story. It's all the good things that happen, because there were so many good things. We're focusing on the negative right now, but it is important. When I initially, I don't even remember if I said it in the testimony. I was thinking it, but it was a little bit of an adrenaline situation, right? Mm-hmm. So you correct me if I already told this. But when we were going back and forth with the injunction for the honking, because it was one day, the next day, I don't remember if it was all one day, but there was a few days where there were different proceedings around the injunction. And Keith came back to me and he said, listen, I got good news. They wanted a whole bunch of things. There were, he said, a whole bunch of points. I don't know if he said 8 or 10, but there were a number of things they were looking for. The judge struck down all their requests with one exception, which is the horns, that the horns have to be limited in scope, and they have to be limited to a designation and for certain times of the day. And I remember thinking, the honking has stopped. Everybody has to sleep. And I don't care about the honking. That's not what we're here for. We're here for a mandate. So whatever, that's fine. And something didn't seem right to me, because I just didn't have time to go through an injunction affidavit, and legalese is not my strength anyways. So I sent it to a friend who is a very prominent legal researcher who has done a lot of work for the JCCF, and who called me and warned me about them. And previously, and I said
sorry, just to back that up, I'm not. When did that phone call happen?
I'd have to check the date. I don't remember. Okay. If I remember correctly, 4th, 5th, around the time where they got involved, right?
Okay.
This was all within a short time frame. But I can check. I can check in my emails and let you know. So anyways, I said to her, hey, listen, we just got this ruling on this injunction. I'm being told that it was ruled in our favor, but I'm not so sure. I was told that there's multiple things, and then only the horns and whatever. Can you take a look at it? So she said, sure. So she looked at it. About an hour later, she emailed me back, and she said, yeah, I don't know who's telling you that. Whoever's telling you that is lying. You lost. The media is correct that you lost the injunction, and I don't see anything in here that can be declared a victory in any way, shape, or form. So then I thought, okay, maybe Keith is just overselling this, right? Maybe he's trying to keep us calm, and he knows that we're under a lot of stress. I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah, you want to assume people are there for the right reasons, for sure.
I tried to, yeah. That's what I was hoping, yeah.
So if I'm understanding, so you had a legal researcher say, look into the Moreva injunction.
No, this is the honking. This is just the honking.
Okay. Yeah. So then they look into the honking, and then injunction that was brought forward by Zexley, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And they say, we don't think the interpretation that you've been given on this is right. We think it's wrong. Okay. Yep. So what did they think specifically that was wrong in Wilson and the JCCF interpretation?
I can send you the email. She basically just said what the legacy media is reporting on is accurate. You lost. There's nothing in there that you won. Whereas I was being told, there was a bunch of points and the judge struck them down, but you won on this one thing. You lost on this one thing, which is a very different interpretation.
Okay, now I'm going to bring this back. So Wilson throughout this has been in touch with Dean French, the former chief of staff, with
which at that point
before
we
Doug
didn't even
Ford.
know. At that
We
point,
didn't.
no clue that Dean French is anywhere even. His would be the last name that popped into my mind with regards to the convoy. Because again, remember, Dean French was writing in the Toronto Sun that he doesn't support honking and protests in residential streets. And by the way, that's another thing I didn't have a chance to address in the hearing. It's so frustrating, and we keep conceding it on the conservative side because the conservatives don't want us to win either, which is another point. They keep saying residential streets. No. It's downtown Ottawa. It's a commercial sector with a few residential buildings. This is not suburban Ottawa that had trucks hanging out on it. It's the downtown streets where there's condos mixed in with commercial buildings. That's not residential. Very important.
Yeah, so and that's the other thing. I think there's a lot of playing on people's ignorance of this. Like, we don't know the layout of the streets that they're describing.
That's right.
And I've thought about this consistently as I'm hearing the evidence come out. I'm like, it would be really important. Why isn't there maps being brought up consistently so that is drilled into people's minds? Like, where's the Parliament buildings? Where were the bulk of people? Where, like, this residential stuff they're talking about, what's actually on those streets? I don't think anyone knows. We're taking the argument at face value, right?
Exactly.
So I just showed Dean French's comments there. I'm going to bring in his text messages between Wilson, because this was something your lawyer, Jim Carhalios, brought into evidence. Where are we at? So this is just a draft I'm working on. I've been pulling stuff from testimony, and this was the text messages.
This is some of the evidence that was submitted, by the way.
Yes, so this has been submitted. This has all been submitted to the Public Order Emergency Commission. That's why I have access to it.
Yep.
He says, yes, he's excited to get your call. Please remind the board I never once spoke with Premier Ford about this, or Katie Telford, Juno's chief, Trudeau's chief. So he's basically saying, because there was concerns from the board. I think you were a large part of those concerns. And then what Jim brought up is, he goes, what it shows is the potential. It shows that the connections were, we don't have any proof to say that they were in contact, but it shows the potential. And it is odd that the former chief of staff for the premier gets involved. The direction of the protest seems to take the heat off of all the provincial mandates and things that came. Like, I had talked with my wife about this.
Hold on. I want to cut you off because this is important.
Go ahead.
Why would he put a message to saying, please inform the board that I have not spoken to these people? You know why? Because he has spoken to those people. And if they know that Doug Ford's buddy is speaking to them, then we would know that these people, the truckers themselves, would lose their minds. Why is the best friend of the guy who imposed the provincial lockdowns talking with all of these people, pretending to represent us? That's like, if I can give a really hyperbolic example, and everybody loses their minds of this, I'm going to protect myself by saying, yes, I am very Jewish, so everybody calm down. When I say, that's like Goebbels coming and saying, I'm going to negotiate with Hitler over the people who are imprisoned in the concentration camps. That's a very hyperbolic example. But you know what I mean? Like, they're on the complete opposite end of this issue. They're on the side of the government, yet they're trying to negotiate for us. Like, that's not how this works.
So I'm going to address this comment here and allow you the chance to respond. It says, after all this time, of course, BJ is bashing one of the few law firms working for Canadians. Most lawyers won't touch this with a 10-foot pole. Again, you had concerns about these political connections. And like you had mentioned, I think is worth pointing out, no one on the board or involved in the organizers knew that Wilson was in touch with, with Dean French. So you want to talk about building trust with your clients. It's probably a good thing to maybe let them know what you're up to behind the scenes and who you're in discussions with about making deals. I guess
ACCF is not a law firm. It's an activist firm. It's not a law firm.
Yeah. So I guess one of the questions that people would have to, was there something, do you feel early on you were heavily involved? For sure. Then you broke your ankle. And I think one of the points of argument has been that you weren't on the ground, I guess, and that you kind of, people were busy and then you slowly got kind of pushed out on the outside. You're saying that seemed to happen around the same time that the JCCF got involved. I can see one legitimate criticism brought up was the RT argument. I think that was I understand what you might have been trying to do, but I think in light of the foreign funding allegations anyways, that it was, hindsight's 2020, it was probably not prudent. So that's the big argument that came back to discredit you. It actually came up in the Dean French text messages. He referred to the communications, the text, right? When you said there was no deal, he called it amateur hour. So I just bring all this up, but you weren't even aware that these communications were happening with Dean French.
No idea. And secondly, all media is propaganda. You telling me the CBC is not propaganda for the Canadian government? Right? They're all propaganda for our culture. When I lived in South America, the mainstream media was propaganda for the Colombian government. When I lived in Mexico, their mainstream media is propaganda for their government as well. So I was shocked. Like, I was actually stunned. I couldn't understand what I was hearing from my lawyer, who doesn't understand how media works. They're all propaganda, and there's different levels of it, but they all are.
I think that's a fair thing to point out. I mean, every government has an outlet that you would say is friendlier to the government. Maybe
exactly.
Not straight propaganda, but there's often connections, and we know as people in media that, hey, so-and-so is friends with such and such, and they're a journalist at such and such outlet, and they're sympathetic to that point of view. That's who they approach to talk about. That was
just an attempt to smear me on camera in front of the commission. That's all that was.
So I'll give
you a chance. During the convoy, they all loved it. During the convoy, they thought it was great.
So to put that, in perspective now, do you regret it in hindsight, or would that be something you would still do?
I would talk to any agency, propaganda or otherwise, just to get as much feelers around. And if you noticed, he started rather hostile with me in that interview. So no, I would talk to any agency that I know, any news outlet that I know has a large outreach, right? That has a large following. And that was my biggest gripe with the Canadian legacy media, because nobody watches them. Why would I invite them in to allocate the majority of the floor space to them, and nobody's going to watch it when I can just go on Steven Crowder? I don't know, is that propaganda? Maybe that's propaganda too. Or is Jordan Peterson propaganda? But I know I would get lots of views on those platforms, and that's what I was going for. I was going for as many clicks as possible.
And so I guess that was one. And I just want to give you a chance. Like, Miller came at you really hard. It seemed like you touched a nerve. I think he
was calm and level-headed the whole time till he got me in front of him. He couldn't control himself.
Wilson had said, I think, something to the effect of he couldn't figure you out. And so, do you want to? That's a broad statement, but do you want to address some of the background communications you had? There was the blow up, I guess, after what do you call it? The War of the Worlds video? Is it
that was
Chris
the first
Barber?
time I met him. That was the very first time I met him. And
was that the Chris Barber video on the 15th or 14th?
That's when Keith did the solo video on Twitter and completely undid all the work I had been working on for weeks to establish mood and behavior amongst law enforcement and intelligence agencies that I knew were watching us.
And I'm just going to bring in your actual testimony now, because that's a perfect place to do it. Sorry, I'm not trying to. You said it really well here. So mood and behavior is what they're monitoring. They don't care what we say. It's mood and behavior. The mood and behavior was positive until right now. You just undid all of that. And he seemed concerned. He said, oh, I'm sorry. Well, and you should have thought of that before. Anyways, that was it. And so, yeah, that was kind of, you brought that up. You were talking about the mood and behavior is what they're monitoring. It's not so much what people say, because people say lots of crazy things. But if, in general, if the crowd dynamics are that the crowd is in a positive mood, there's not likely a chance that the police are going to perceive that as threatening.
Which is why Slowly came out in the beginning and said, hey, this is just requires a political solution, because we got people having hot tubs and dance parties and families hanging around with their kids and bouncing. Like, it was exactly the mood and the tone that we were going for in the very beginning when Tamara first reached out to me.
Okay, so now one of the criticisms, I guess, would be, after you broke your leg, how much communication was there between you and Tamara? Because the painting, the picture, the narrative that was painted, I guess, by Miller was that you've kind of been pushed on the outs. You minimal connection, right? Minimal contact, and then you went rogue. Right. This is kind of the narrative they painted. You went rogue, and you decided you were going to go out and put out this messaging, So I'm going to lay it all out, right? That is the narrative that was brought forward. And then just full on, what is this? I guess walk us through your feelings and your thoughts on it.
Tamara and I communicated frequently from day one, all up until the day she got arrested. And, in my promo video for the book where I'm giving her a hug, that's the night before she went and got arrested. From there, a few hours later, is when she was on camera and crying, if you remember that video. And I remember watching that thinking I felt so bad for her. And you know what that was? That was just massive stress and fatigue, just emotional stress and fatigue for just weeks of constantly being harassed and hounded. And I think she just broke down. That's what you were watching. Because when she came into my room that time, we did a number of times, but that was on the 14th of February, 16th of February. No, it was after the emergency measures. I don't remember the specific date.
Yeah, I would have to look that up.
The day before she was arrested. And it was, like she was under major stress, and she handles stress pretty well. She's pretty good at that, as am I. But sat her down and said, hey, let's just chill. Let's relax. Let's calm. And she's like, yeah, it's just getting to me a little bit. And, we talked for 5 minutes about things in general and finished up with a hug. And I said, wait, I want to get a picture of us. We've been working so much. We got a picture when she showed up. It was amazing. She comes into the Swiss. She shows up. I tap her on the back. She jumps on me and hugs me and was like crying. It was amazing. And then we're at this moment at the end. And between them, we had like no time to have pictures together. Beyond the press conferences, we would see each other. She would come in and out of my room. And that went up all until the day that she was arrested. And then I still have not spoken to her since then because, unlike others, I don't want to put her at any risk at being arrested again.
Okay, so now there's a few other things. That was something I had forgotten about. That was accusation leveled, I guess, against you early on in your testimony before I think you even took a stand. Is this the guy who stole all the money? Of course, he wrote a book. So the money, I'm familiar with this, but I'm bringing these out because honestly,
I know.
I'm seeing it, right? Like, I mean, this is a divide. You came in, everyone's like, look, this is Team Freedom Corps. This is Team Protest. And we
had a treasurer. We had a treasurer who was running all the money. I'm the message guy. Go to the treasurer. And he's...
So, just to back that up, that money's in escrow, correct? Like you have no access. It's been frozen.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to put this up, right?
If you go back and watch the hour before I testified, what are they doing? They're doing the financial breakdown of where all the money is. And what does the government say? It shows clearly all the money is in escrow. And I was told that I may be asked about the Bitcoin part. They didn't even ask me because they covered that in the financial filings just before I got it. So was nobody listening?
Because let's clear that up. Because most people don't know about Bitcoin. So I want to get this across, right? There's seed phrases. Multiple people there's 5 seed phrases. Am I correct? One seed phrase per person. And so you only had one element of this.
That's right.
And let's just walk through that. And then how does that work to access those funds? Like you're not even responsible for it. You could never take out that money, touch that money, unless you had the permission of the other seed people,
the other Bitcoiners that were raising the money. So they had 4 of them. They wanted one person involved in the convoy to have a seed phrase. And by the way, that's the software Nunchuck that wrote a letter to the Ontario Supreme Court saying we can't control it. It's by design. And Ted Cruz read it at the CPAC conference. He read the response from Nunchuck to the Ontario government. But yeah, I had 1 of 5 phrases. I couldn't do anything with it if I wanted to.
So I think that was an important thing to clear up because I know most people don't have any understanding of how
that
works.
Like? You know what it's like? It's like having, this is the analogy I try to give people. It's like having a business bank account where you have multiple signatures to withdraw money. So you'll have a business, 2 people need to sign each check to withdraw money. In this case, you would need 3 of the authorized 5 people to withdraw the money, and I was just 1.
And now I'm going to draw this back, and we're getting close to. If you got to go, let me know. If
I got a little bit of extra time, I'm still waiting for a message, so we can go on for a little bit, and I can always come back on with you, man. You know that.
I appreciate that. So let's go. I guess why do you think Wilson got involved? I know this is I guess it's just
Speculative.
opinion, right? It's speculation. But what was in it for Wilson? I mean, what was the goals, do you think? I mean, you've laid out that you had these concerns about the political ends, right? And the attachment to Doug Ford at an arm's length. But what was the ultimate, I guess, consequence of Wilson getting involved in your mind? Like, what changed with the involvement of these lawyers that would have been different had things kind of stayed the same without that involvement? I guess that's my major question. Like, how did this change as a result of them being involved in your view?
Okay, so let's start with the second part first. When we arrived there was increased tension and frustration amongst the various convoys, because there wasn't just one, there were so many, because there was such a backlog, right? That's what caused gridlock. It was gridlock just from traffic, because there were thousands of truckers. Like, we had, there was a database where truckers would sign up, and they lost count at 36,000 trucks registered to come to Ottawa. They had a crash on their server, then new names came up, and they told me there was an estimate of about 50,000 trucks, and this was 3 days before we arrived. So there was already frustration and tension from people from sitting in traffic for hours, not having places to park, figuring out where to go, because we did everything we needed to get to Ottawa, but we just got overwhelmed because nobody imagined it would become this large. So it took about a week or so for cooler heads to prevail, for us to start to systematize the processes, which is something that Chris Guerra was struggling with. I tried to give him some suggestions.
Chris Guerra, just for people that aren't familiar,
Adopt a Trucker.
Okay.
Who was on the ground in Ottawa for 1 week working with the Ottawa police, yet the commission hasn't called him to testify. I mean, the Ottawa police told him where to park.
When you say working with Ottawa police, on the logistics side of what was expected, where truckers would go,
where they're authorized to park, where they're not authorized to park, all that sort of stuff, like staging.
The commission hasn't called him.
And the commission has not called him because, remember, we talked about standing? I applied for standing with Chris Guerra together, the two of us, and we were denied. Why were we denied? Because it was my understanding that any sort of proceedings around this, the JCCF and Keith would be representing us, because they were doing so up until May with this Mariva, where I had to hand over the seed phrase from the crypto. So the Mariva kept getting extended, and it was finally ruled upon sometime in May. All right.
And so May, just to back that up, Wilson got your seed phrase.
Yeah, he got it.
And then he took the stand indicating that
he didn't.
That he didn't get that phrase.
That's right.
Okay.
And
I think that's important to keep these things in our minds, like straight in our minds, because it's so much going on. There's so many different people, different groups, like, it's just, I've been following this every day, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm struggling even taking notes, everything, to keep it all straight. So I can't imagine the average viewer. And I think that's why we're getting.
That's why I have to tell the truth. I have to tell the truth, because I'll never be able to keep track of this. I would never be able to keep track of if I was being deceptive to one person or another. Like I couldn't handle that because there's so much was going on. So yeah, I surrendered the seed phrase to Norm Groot, who was the agent acting on behalf of Keith Wilson, who was the lawyer in charge of it. So he knows they got it. They got it through his agent. So what were we going with this? You were asking a question. Now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, I was under the impression, because they were representing me up until May in this Mariva injunction, that, okay, they're representing me because they're sending me privileged emails. It's very important to understand a retainer is a payment agreement. But when a lawyer is sending you privileged emails and going to court, that means your lawyer is representing you. That's all you need to have representation. So I was getting representation from Keith Wilson's agent, Norm Groot, in the Mariva. So, okay, so they're representing me. Then I find out in August, because Keith Wilson went to a proceeding that he didn't tell me was occurring. We just found it by chance and said, we're not representing Mr. Dichter. I'm like, you were just representing me, and you never issued any sort of notice to me to tell me that you are no longer representing me. Like, that's crazy. If you're a lawyer, you know how serious that is. It's very different in the legal world. So when I explained this all to Jim, we said, okay, we found out that there was an application to have standing in this proceeding. It was due, I believe, June 31st, if I'm not mistaken. We find out about this in the beginning of August. So it said, okay, let's submit a late application for standing for myself and Chris Guerra. So we can be, because right now there's just one party representing the truckers. That's the group that the JCCF is administering it. There's another side. There was myself, Chris Guerra, and Chad Eros, who have all been talking, along with Bridget Belton. So there's 4 of us. We're 50% of the board that that registered Freedom Corp. Chad is the one who actually did the registration, and we were not called or given standing to testify. And they thought they would get by without me finding out until the commission was investigating the Freedom Convoy. My name kept coming up over and over and over and over and over again. They're like, wait, who's this guy Benjamin? Oh, he's the spokesperson. Well, they didn't tell us that. We're going to have to call him to testify and summons him. And that's how I got there.
All right. I think that's a pretty good place to jump off. Like, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm sure we could keep you more. I mean, I've heard this too. And again, I'm just trying to give you as much
because
opportunity to address as many things.
And I've clarified this a million times. This is why it's so frustrating for me, because many people have heard this, and I keep getting the same people making the same accusations. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, and it happens, right? So I guess I will go here. I'll just pop it in. I don't know what they're referring to. Mr. Dichter started questions about you started long before the convoy. There was a YouTube influencer role he was working at with Julia Mora, Frank Vaughn, Critical Thinker, and Derek Rance mentioned this. So I don't know where they're coming from with that, but perhaps you can address that. And I'm just looking at the questions through here because it was like everybody's on the same team. This is the perception going in. And then you get on the stand and everyone's like, wait a minute, why is he saying these things about our team, right? And so I'm just trying to give you as much chance because I know how people run with these ideas. And I think it's important that people understand where this comes from and what it's rooted in. And so
Critical Thinker, I don't know who that is, or if it's somebody I know them by name and they changed their platform, but that I don't. The rest of them I know from because I was producing podcasts for the past several years, one of which was One Godless Woman, and the other is the Quiggin Report, as well as a bunch of other podcasts, right? The one with Stephen Hicks and whatever. So I got to know those 3 through Quiggin's podcast, that they were fans of the podcast. And I had reached out and we talked and got to know each other sort of thing. And that's how I know them. In terms of questions, I don't know. The questions seem to come up. I'm going to tell you quite bluntly and directly. Once this guy came out of nowhere named Jeremy McKenzie and then started telling everybody I'm a Jew. And that seemed to be a particular contention to him. He has some obsession with Jews. Now, I'm pretty much as secular as they come. I am Canadian. That's why I mentioned in my, just for those people, in my testimony, I started explaining that, yes, I'm Jewish, and I am also the biological grandson of Brigadier General Dennis Whitaker, as I found out when my biological siblings found me. So I don't know. Am I part of this cabal conspiracy that Jeremy doesn't shut up about? Pardon my language. Sorry, it just gets a little annoying. Because I've been hearing this for years, this constant harassment from him. And so I don't know. Is that the question? I have no idea. But yeah, I met them when they were fans of the Quiggin Report. That's how I got to know Frank Vaughn. And listen, people have differences of opinion and whatever, but I try to reach out to as many people as possible. I try to be cool with as many people as possible. And he just shows up. And you know what it's like? It's like when you have a team of employees, and of which I've managed many staff before. And you have a great team and you hire somebody and that one person is cancer. And they bring in all the negativity and then it spreads to the rest of your employees. It's the same sort of phenomenon that seemed to happen with this group of people who all got to know each other online. We all kind of knew each other. They were great. And then somebody comes along and starts, with some Third Reich propaganda or veiled Third Reich propaganda. And then everybody just turns into a lunatic. It was just really weird.
Okay. So I think that's a good place to go. And then I guess you don't have to address this. I think it's in the same.
I will address everything.
I think it's in the same thread of thinking, right?
Tell me.
BJ's a Fed, right? Going back to the narrative, right? I've heard this time and time again. I'm just going to bring it all up with you, right? So, because they look at it, they see what happened. They go, well, why is he driving? They see you as the wedge of contention. They see, right? And I get that because it's hard
it's so funny. These people come in and friggin' sabotage the convoy. They're the ones that are the heroes, but I'm the Fed. Like, there's a reason Tamara called me. What do you think the reason she called me for was? Not because I'm a Fed. Feds don't tell people, don't go into buildings. Feds tell people, go into buildings. I did the opposite. I got my bank accounts frozen and my credit cards frozen. My lines of credit frozen. Everything I had in my life was frozen. That didn't happen to Ray Epps. So it's just really weird that it's the cognitive dissonance that somebody has been building up all this nonsense and calling somebody a name, and they just get married to this vision of the world, if you want to call it, and then somebody comes along and I finally get the chance to testify and put everything on the record. And what does it do? It causes them to jump into the stage of cognitive dissonance and rage. But eventually, I'm hoping calmer heads will prevail. People will abandon this cruelty and realize, hey, there's a reason Tamara said on stage, in her testimony, that I asked Benjamin to run my Twitter. He's really good at Twitter. He did a great job. Because Tamara and I knew her the longest of everybody there. Most of those people just met her within a couple of weeks of the convoy, and 2 or 3 people a few months before. I met her in 2017 or 2018, one of those years. And, we've been close friends ever since. That's why I knew, irrespective of the insurmountable amount of pressure that was going to be put on her to lie, we always had a great connection, and I love her like a sister. And when I was talking during my testimony, what you may not have seen was Tamara bobbing her head like this most of the time. I would say the entire time through, until one of her lawyers turned to her and gave her a dirty look, and then she stopped. But I love her. She's wonderful. So I don't understand how people they can't distinguish. They don't understand that Tamara and I were a team through all of this. And I'll tell you the one thing that did massive damage, okay? And then we'll cut it there. And you're in media. You'll understand the significance of this. We arrived in Ottawa. We're at the Swiss Hotel, and we did the first press conference that we invited alternative media to it, because I wanted this to be the opportunity for alternative media to shine, because I knew all corporate and legacy media do nothing but lie and smear people. So we finished our first press conference. Andrew Lawton was there. Epoch Times was there. National Telegraph, them, a whole bunch of people. We finished it, and I get a call from Alexandra from Rebel Media. And she says, we missed the meeting, the press conference. There was a miscommunication. We want to come and interview you. And I thought, you know what? My inbox is full. My email, everything, Twitter, is getting thousands of messages an hour. And I thought, you know what? If you can be here in 10 minutes, Chris Barber just left. But if you can be here in 10 minutes, I'll keep Tamara here and we'll sit down and do an interview. I told Tamara, and she said, yeah, okay, we'll wait. So they showed up. They must have been running across the city. It was her, Lincoln, and Mocha. They sat down, set up their cameras, and they interviewed us for 45 minutes to an hour between those two, maybe 15 minutes. And the reason I did that, I thought, let's kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We're going to get the full real story out, and I'm going to give it to Ezra, and this will be a record video for them, because it's the #1 story in the world right now. And this is the first exclusive interview. So it was myself and Tamara. Gave it to him. Alexandra was all excited. Lincoln was excited. Great. This is a break for them. And I communicated with Alexandra. She said, yeah, I'll let you know. I'm going to translate it into French. Fine, great. The next day, I followed up. What happened at that interview? Give me the link so I can get it out there so people can see the real motivation behind the convoy. And she said, I'm working on it. I'm still waiting for approval. Okay, later that day, I don't know. I'm still waiting for approval. What's going on? The next day, I didn't get approval. I don't know what's happening. Ezra spiked the story. This was the #1 news story on the planet with myself and Tamara in our full context, where all the global media who do watch Rebel News, by the way, would have gotten the true story of what we were about, that we're peace and love, and these are our grievances, our mandates, everything. And they spiked it. How do you do that for the biggest story of your life? Is that news?
You know what? That's actually interesting because I heard that you refused to speak to Rebel News on the way out of the testimony. They were upset about it. And so is this the context?
They don't want to talk to me. If they don't want to talk to me, okay, fine. What am I going to do? You know, Sheila did a segment on me yesterday, and she said, I'll have Benjamin on at any time, because somebody sent me the thing and said you should reach out to Sheila. So you know what I did? I called Jim Kalaharios, my lawyer, and I said, listen, Jim, Sheila was talking about me and us and our testimony. She said she'll have us on unedited, full context, which is, okay, great. Maybe they want to talk to us. I thought they just don't want to talk to us. So I said, why don't you reach out? If you have Sheila, he said, you have Sheila's contact? He said, yeah. I said, fine. I'll reach out to Sheila and tell her we're available. So he messaged her yesterday early in the day saying, Sheila, Ben and I are available to come on anytime to give full context to all of this stuff. Let us know. Still haven't heard anything. So maybe on Monday we'll hear something from them.
Okay, so we'll look for that maybe potentially in the future. So now I know that they were bothered. They said you were rude. Now I guess that was the one thing that came out. I wanted to know the context of that.
Rude.
Apparently, you were very rude when you denied their.
She wanted to come. I didn't give any. Firstly, my brain was fried. Right, I was just like, not now. But I didn't say that. I just kept walking, and she came to one of the people that was there with me, because one of the person who helped me with the book was there and whatever. And she wanted to come for lunch with me, and I just was not in the mood for a lunch with media. It was nothing personal. And I said, we're just going to go for lunch today. Do me a favor, send me an email, and then we can do a follow-up interview after. And I said, but we're going to go for lunch for now. And that was it. That's all I said. So if that's rude, I don't know. And I don't think I did it in a rude manner. I wouldn't.
Oh, and coming off of the stand for 3 hours, you might have not realized you were short too, because I know what it's like to be hyper focused on something for hours on end, and then the adrenaline dump that happens.
Well, you saw the video I did with the woman calling us a terrorist with the LGBT flag, right, on Instagram. I wasn't rude to her. I said specifically, the trucker convoy was there to protect everybody's right to free speech, including this woman here behind us. She should be allowed to do this, and that's why we did what we did. And now we just got to come together and learn how to love each other.
And to close out, you have a book coming out November 11th. It was a book launch Monday?
Yeah, we're doing a book launch in Toronto on Monday. Tickets are available if you go to my Twitter feed. I put the team's working on it right now, but I put the link up that they've provided. Ben Bankus is going to be there doing a comedy set. Like, we're going to try not to. I don't want to do me reading a chapter of the book. Like, who wants to hear that, right? But I might even do that now. I'm starting thinking. But basically, Ben, we're going to do a podcast stream, a couple of us together. We're going to record it and just talk about some of the stories behind it with somebody who was there, and just with Daniel Boardman, actually. And it's going to be a fun night. And it'll be in a comedy club, drinks, whatever, and just let's all get together. Because I want to thank as many people as I can in person. That's why we may be doing an event in Vancouver. We're going to be doing an event in Quebec in the new year. I'm going to be in an event in Boston on November 17th. And now I got to contact some people in Houston and in Los Angeles who want to do events down there as well.
Well, all the best as you roll out your book launch. And is there anything else do you want to lay out before you depart today?
I think what I would, if there's one thing I wish, the people who have bought into the conspiracies about me that have been peddled by Jeremy and some others, or there's a whole group of people, I wish they would just drop the cruelty. All it was myself and Tamara, who had, we've had a pretty long, strong friendship, coming together to try to help everybody get their freedoms back. And I don't understand why people would even accept, everybody's they smear Jordan Peterson all the time, right? Jordan and I were talking about that. Actually, I asked him, I said, did you go through this when you were starting to get attention on you? He said, oh yeah, this is nothing. He said, I got it from my old colleagues. I got it everywhere. He's like, this is just the nature of it. And I'm like, is there anything we can do to just calm people down? He's like, you just got to work through it, man. That's just the way it is. And I just wish they would drop the rhetoric and the cruelty, because the only people it helps is Trudeau and the political establishment that want to jail us in our house. It doesn't help us.
I'll just back that up. Do you think, like, you're a strong personality, you're strong in your opinions, and then obviously there's the background there with some influencers that are big fans, right, of Jeremy Mackenzie's work. Do you think that's where a lot of that animosity stems from?
I think so. I don't know precisely, because really I haven't focused much time on it at all. I just kind of dismiss it. I don't block very much, but sometimes when it's over and over and over and over and over again, then I have no choice but to block, because it's constantly on my feed and I need to see other stuff. But what for me has been so rewarding is the endorsement on my book was written by Jordan Peterson. And I sent him the entire script, minus the Bitcoin chapters, because we're just finishing those off. And he was kind enough to support the manuscript. And the manuscript is positive. There's a couple of little bumps in here, but in general, I designed it so all of you can go to if you have liberal friends or people who are against the convoy, that they can read it as well and walk away with a true understanding of what it is. And for the rest of you, it'll give you a lot more insight and context in terms of what we were dealing with.
Fair enough. All right. I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you so much. You've been very generous with your time. I just for the record, we originally said 15 to 30 minutes when I contacted you. So
I know. It is what it is. I'm going to get yelled at right now, but what can you do?
I'm sorry in advance. Thank you for joining us, Benjamin Dichter. Maybe we'll catch up in the future.
Likewise. Thanks, brother.
Cheers. Bye.
Goodbye.
All right, everyone. That is our interview with Benjamin Dichter. He was the public relations media communications for the Freedom Corps organization. Just recently came off his Public Order Emergency Commission testimony, and we're thankful for getting his perspective. We're going to be reaching out to Wilson. We'll reach out to some of the other people involved and see if they'll speak to us and give us their opinions so we can provide balance to all our viewers. Until next time, I'm Greg Staley of Diverge Media.